Thought I would do a video on the topic of chain fire and percussion revolvers. Basically, a chain fire in these percussion guns refers to when more chambers than the intended one end up firing at the same time. You can think of it more like a chain reaction, which is no doubt where the name comes from. The chain fire can be very dangerous because if we look at the geometry of the gun, there's no way the bullet or bullets can get by the barrel or frame of the gun without striking it or being deflected. Unless you have a multiple chain fire, that lowest chamber is probably the least likely to go off. But if it does, it's going to send the ball right into the hole there where the loading lever comes out of, and that wouldn't go anywhere. The possibility of chain fire really underlines one of the reasons for protective gear, especially eye protection. Shooters of percussion guns should also understand that the cap used to fire the chamber or pieces of it can blow back toward the shooter. This cap area of the cylinder is where some think the chain fire happens. This is because a loose cap, or one that's fallen off during firing or recoil, provides an entry point for the flash or hot gases escaping through the nipple to enter and ignite the powder of an adjacent chamber. As I've been shooting these guns for more years than I care to count and never had a chain fire, I'm somewhat suspicious that this might not be likely. I'm saying that because I certainly have had some caps come off that I wasn't aware of during the heat of some battle with pop cans or steel plates. Of course, I might have just been lucky, so I decided to shoot some where I intentionally had removed the caps from adjacent chambers and see if I could get them to fire. Lacking balls, I only loaded wads over the powder on these chambers. Anyway, we're going to load up, let's say, this chamber here, and these two will also be loaded, but with just with wads in them, and we're going to fire this. These two will not have caps on them. This one and this one, of course, this one will be capped. And we're going to see if either one of these two will go off. We're going to omit loading up these down in here because we really feel that maybe if these go off, then we might try these down here to see how many can go. But if these two don't go off, which are a lot closer to the burning gases that are going to come out of this nipple here, if these two don't go off, we kind of doubt these two would. So we're just going to do these two up here. Okay, we did push those down, make sure they're tight on the powder. We don't want any space on that. We'll do is put this in the gun then and cap her up. Here we go, number 10 CCI cap. The older guns seem to work pretty well with those. That's on the correct cylinder, correct chamber I should say. So we'll get this camera set up and then we'll shoot that and see if either one of these two go off. Next step was to remove the barrel and check and see if either of the adjacent chambers had fired. When I loaded the adjacent chambers, I placed red discs over the felt wads to make it easier to see if the chambers had chain fired. And here we can see that neither had gone off. Okay, we're going to hold up that center chamber again, cap it back here, and see if we can get those to go off. Either the one on the left or one on the right. I'm pretty sure I'm not the first person to have done this. But by the time I go through all the forums, YouTube videos, books, I figure about that time I can probably have done this and got some idea myself. Okay, this is the second test. We've loaded up that center chamber again. It should fire, and the other ones, who knows? I didn't feel anything weird, so I don't think they went off that time either. Let's get the camera, take a close look. And no sir, they're still there. Wanted to see if the slick shot nipples would make a difference, since they have extra holes to help the gas to divert to the sides, and these holes could be additional entry points for the hot gas coming back through the nipple. Okay, here's what it looks like capped up. We're using a number 10 Remington. That's what the slick shots tend to like. So we'll rotate this in the right position and see what happens. Okay, here goes same thing with the slick shot nipple. And we're not making any claims here that just because I've shot three or four times, and if those uncapped chambers don't go off, we're not saying that they wouldn't sometime. Alright, we're loaded up again. Let's see if we can get one of those two adjacent ones to go off this time. Again, we have no caps on the two slick shot nipples adjacent to the center one. I don't believe anything happened that time either. Again, we'll take her apart and examine it. Well, we're still seeing red. Alright, let's cap those two up just to make sure they'd go off. In each trial I capped the adjacent chambers to be sure they would fire, and also of course to clear the chambers. So in all there were 8 opportunities for chain fires from the nipple end of the cylinder, and none took place. It certainly doesn't prove it can't happen, but it does cast some doubt that this is the responsible area. So even if it's unlikely that chain fires come from the nipple end of the cylinder, correct fitting caps can help to reduce the risk. We need to look at the nipple end here, and what we'll do there of course is make sure that our caps that we're putting on there have the correct fit, and that they stay in place when the gun is fired or when the cylinder here is rotating. Now we'll switch to the opposite end of the cylinder where I feel a chain fire is more likely to originate, and there are several methods of loading that can help to reduce the risk here. One method that's pretty well accepted is that we have a slightly oversized ball, maybe 5/6 thousandths over the diameter across here of the chambers, and as that ball is pushed into that chamber we form a seal between the side of the lead here and the side of the chamber. So to kind of get an idea what the seal looks like, we loaded 3 cast round balls, 4.51, a 4.54, and a 4.57. There's no powder of course behind because we want to recover to see what the seals look like and how it varies with the diameters. There's one out. And we drove out the 4.51 first. The bands show the contact between the ball and the side of the chambers. The rings aren't perfect because I believe a small amount of smearing occurred because the ball rotated slightly when the punch wasn't centered in driving out the ball. The cylinder we used is out of a 2019 1860 Uberti. The ball measured .446 at the sealing ring, and the chambers have a slight taper at the mouth, so even with a 4.57 ball, we didn't seem to get a ring of lead cut off as we do with some of the revolver cylinders. So life is good. Problem is you just used up your last 4.54 Swedge Hornady factory round balls, and we all know what that means. Just then you remembered your buddy has a 4.54 mold that he got online for $200 and he owes you. The situation improves. You check the diameter and he's casting right on. Head to the range and load up. Never used lube or wads for your factory loads before. And just as you pull the trigger you wonder what the measurement was across the ball where the spruce is cut off. Next day after recovering you have someone else measure it. Sure enough, 6-7 thou smaller. I did do a test where I put a 50,000 disc over the powder in the first 2 chambers, and on these I put some lube on top of each disc. The idea was to see if lube would be forced by the ball in the second chamber where it had the flat spot cutoff area, but not in the first because here the spruce was loaded on top. This is the way I load the spruce cutoffs on cast round ball unless I feel I have sufficient protection from hot gas getting by the flat spot. The third chamber got a lube foul wad directly on top of the powder, then placed the 4.54 cast round balls on the chambers as mentioned and pushed them down. There's our first one starting to go down. Put a little more pressure on that one. Yeah, we can see there where the spruce cutoff is, and we can also see the mark of our loading lever that's starting to push that down. Okay, we'll finish that one. There's what it looks like when it's been shoved down. We can actually see part of a little lead ring that was formed when it was cut off by the chamber of the excess ball, because these are 4.54 and the chambers are smaller than that. Okay, location of that spruce flat spot is right here.
Okay, we shoved that down, and here's the important part. Remember, we had lube underneath that ball, and we had lube underneath this first ball. And I'm seeing no signs of lube coming around this ball, the first one we did. But here's our second one. We can't say the same for that, which is exactly where that flat spot was. We've got lube that's oozed up there, telling us that we have got a space between the ball and the chamber wall. And that would not be good if we just put the ball down top of the powder and went to firing away, because the flash from the adjacent cylinder can then make its way through that opening into the powder charge, setting off this one, what we call a chain fire.
Hopefully the information here will be helpful when loading and shooting percussion revolvers. As many others have said, use correct size percussion caps on nipples that are in good condition. Use a correct size bullet that gives a good seal in the chambers. A lubed wad over the powder or lube at the end of each chamber will give added protection against chain fires and help to keep the fouling soft, which can improve accuracy. Comments are welcome.